A half-awake dream and what it revealed. Part 1, number 1668, the 3rd of June 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Philosophical Summary. Dream. This early morning, somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, I had a vivid dream. In the dream, I was hired by the CEO of a company. He believed his company had been misled and was moving in the wrong direction. He wanted to change it, but he did not know how. He told me that I was a mathematician and a pure-hearted scientist, and he wanted me to help restore the company to the correct path. I entered the company and began examining its problems. After identifying many of their issues and developing some ideas on how to fix them, the CEO suddenly died, perhaps from a heart attack or some other unexpected event. I was left alone inside a hostile environment. Almost immediately, I found myself surrounded by people who opposed my thinking, my equations, my methods, my interpretation of data, and my way of approaching problems. They preferred approaches that were familiar to them and had served them well for many years. Nobody seemed interested in understanding why I thought the way I did. Instead, they were interested in defending the existing system. The system was comfortable, predictable, and profitable for those operating within it. Changing direction would require questioning long-held assumptions, accepted new ways of thinking, and established new rules for business practices. As I watched this unfold, I began to realize that the company in my dream represented something much larger than a single organization. It seemed to symbolize any large institution or established industry where preserving the existing structure gradually becomes more important than its original mission or the search for better solutions. In such environments, the original mission slowly fades into the background, while new procedures replace old traditions and newly established interests take center stage. The further I reflected on the dream, the more familiar this pattern seemed. What the dream represented, as I drifted between sleep and wakefulness, I realized how closely this dream resembled my own journey during the past 17 years of my medical study and research. The dream was not really about a company. The company represented a larger system. It could have been medicine, academia, business, government, healthcare, or any large human organization. Once a system starts moving in a certain new direction or interests, many people inside that system naturally begin defending the new direction itself. Over time, the original purpose or mission can be forgotten, while the system becomes increasingly occupied with protecting its own habits, assumptions, incentives, and traditions. For example, the healthcare system's original mission of saving patients' lives can gradually shift toward generating revenue and protecting profit margins. The CEO in my dream was different. He sensed that something was wrong. He believed the organization had lost its original direction, which was precisely why he brought me in. Then he disappeared from the center stage of decision-making. Looking back now, I think the CEO symbolized something much larger than a business leader. As the dream continued, it gradually realized that he represented a mission. In a pure symbolic sense, the CEO represented God assigning me a task. The task was not to save a company. The task was to search for truth, discover whatever I could discover, and communicate it as honestly and accurately as much as possible. That realization stayed with me after I woke up because it connected directly with many experiences from my own life, whether I was studying engineering, running companies, learning psychology, or conducting medical research. I was usually less interested in defending existing beliefs than understanding how systems actually worked. In many situations, the most difficult challenge was not finding data. The most difficult challenge was understanding what the data truly meant. Mathematics, physics, medicine, and interpretation. This led me to another thought. Throughout my life, I have never been opposed to mathematics, quite the opposite. Mathematics has been one of the central pillars of my education and career. What concerns me is not mathematics itself, but the way mathematical results are often interpreted. Statistics is not wrong. Correlation is not wrong. Regression isn't wrong. P-values are not wrong. These are useful tools, however. Tools can be used honestly or dishonestly. Sometimes people begin with a desired conclusion and then use certain select mathematical methods to justify that pre-implanted conclusion. In those situations, the mathematics may be technically correct while the interpretation becomes misleading. This problem is not limited to one industry. It can occur in business, economics, government, healthcare, legal, and many other fields. The mathematical tools themselves may be valid, but their outputs can be interpreted in ways that support particular agendas. As the dream continued, I found myself thinking about many of the disciplines I have studied over the years. Plasticity can become complicated. Viscosity can become complicated. Topology can become complicated. Wave theory can become complicated. Frequency domain analysis can become complicated. Glucose data, blood pressure data, body weight data, and countless pathophysiological measurements can become overwhelmingly complicated. Eventually, I arrived at a conclusion that felt surprisingly simple. The mathematics itself is often not the most important issue. The interpretation of the mathematical results is usually far more difficult and important. A mathematical output is not the truth. It is a signal. The real challenge is to understand deeply what the signal actually means. What is hidden? What is obvious? What has been averaged away? What has been ignored? What mechanism is producing the observed outcome? These questions are often more important than the equation itself. This realization helped me understand my own health conditions through pathophysiology and my emotional journey through psychology more clearly. My work has never been primarily about group averages or large populations. Instead, I have been interested in system behavior. I have wanted to understand how a biomedical system changes over time under repeated stress, repeated damage, adaptation, recovery, and triggering events. Traditional medical research often focuses on population averages and statistical associations. These approaches can be useful for understanding groups of people. My interest, however, has been different. I have wanted to understand the dynamics of an individual system and how its behavior evolves over time, particularly my own health. After all, if I cannot extend my own life, what else can I contribute to human society? Human body and mind are organic systems, which differ fundamentally from the inorganic materials commonly studied in engineering. A steel beam, a bridge, or a machine component cannot repair itself after damage. The human body and mind can adapt, compensate, recover, remodel, and sometimes deteriorate in highly nonlinear ways. Therefore, the central question is not simply what the average value is, but how the system responds, accumulates damage, adapts, and eventually reaches a tipping point or recovers from one. For this reason, I have focused on a movie rather than snapshots, on system trajectories rather than individual observations, on system behavior rather than isolated measurements, and on the continuous interaction among strain, stress, damage, adaptation, recovery, and triggering events over time. I believe that understanding these dynamic processes is essential for understanding the true behavior of a biomedical system. Over time, I gradually realized that disease is not merely a quarterly diagnosis report attached to a patient. Disease behaves more like an evolving process. In the same way, health cannot be fully described by a single number because health itself is nonlinear and dynamic. As a result, I began viewing risk less as a probability and more as a measure of how sensitive a biomedical system becomes to triggering forces. This way of thinking eventually led me toward what I now call viscoplastic medicine theory (VMT). When I think about medicine, I often find it interesting that many people regard image interpretation as one of the most sophisticated areas of the field. Yet in many ways, interpreting a CT scan or MRI image is fundamentally a geometric problem. A physician observes shapes, structures, patterns, and abnormalities that appear on an image. I call them the hard branch of medical science. The more difficult challenge lies elsewhere. Physiology and biology are dynamic. Blood glucose changes continuously. Blood pressure changes continuously. Body weight changes every day. Sleep changes continuously. Organ function changes continuously. Everything moves, interacts, amplifies other influences, and evolves through time. I call them the soft branch of medical science. This is where my background in mathematics, physics, engineering, AI, and systems analysis became useful. I began looking at medicine not as a collection of isolated snapshots of measurements but as an evolving system whose behavior unfolds over months, years, and decades, similar to a movie. This is part 1.